Welcome back to the Environmental Psychology Groningen Podcast. Every few weeks we speak with researchers that are working in our department about what they've been studying and its relevance to climate change in general, and more specifically within the realm of pro-environmental behavior. And this week I have a PhD candidate, and I'll let you introduce yourself. Can you explain your name and what you're working on, and a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Hi, my name is Xinran Wang. I'm a third-year PhD student supervised by Linda Stack, a Matty Judge. I'm from China originally, and it's my third year. My research topic examines the perceptions of the roles of different societal actors in addressing climate change. Nice.
And as is tradition here on the podcast, we ask our guests to bring a plant that has some significance to them. So you've brought a plant with you. Can you get that and explain a little bit about why it's the significance is to you?
Presented. Every plant is special and significant, but this one is, so far, what has been doing the best among all my plants. Mm-hmm. And I like it because it has a tropical feel. So when the weather is not that sunny and warm, I can still get some sunny vibe just by looking at the plant.
You can pretend that you're on an island.
Yes.
And is it because it makes you have that sense of like escape from the grayness of the Netherlands, that's kind of what makes it special?
Yes, the escape.
Yeah.
But also it still thrives regardless. It's a very low maintenance plant.
Yeah.
So also just to stay strong.
Yeah, that's kind of what office plants need. They need to be like resilient to withstand the occasional inadvertent neglect that we put them through.
Exactly.
But we're here to talk about your research. What have you been looking into the most recently in terms of your research that you'd like to talk a little bit about?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Recently, I think we're really zooming in on the roles of different societal actors. Specifically like government, business, citizens as voters, also consumers, but also financial sector, media, NGOs. It's basically everyone who has the power and resource to make sustainable change.
Yeah.
It's like how we can, who is responsible, who is capable to do something, and are they currently taking actions? Do they plan to take actions in the near futures? So we're really zooming in, attributing responsibility to those who should and can take up the role and try to promote societal-wide climate actions.
And what have you been finding so far in terms of how each of those actors both perceive their own ability to make change and how the other actors sort of perceive them and what they think they should be doing?
I think one main message that we have found also aligned with what IPCC has emphasized is everyone should and can act. Mm-hmm. And in order to promote societal actions, we also do need everyone to do something. For example, government can implement policies, business can change their sustainable practice and offer more sustainable products, and consumers can change their own behaviors, but also we can act as advocates. Advocates.
Yeah.
That to promote pro-environmental behaviors in our workplace, but also in individual life. So everyone is responsible, but still, those who have more powers, they should and can lead the transactions. For example, for policy making, if they can implement policies to change the system, then it's easier for everyone else to do something.
Yeah, so like every actor, it's not a question of whether or not they should be doing something. Everyone needs to be doing something, but I guess it's a question of what are they doing. And I think maybe a fundamental question to start with would be, why do perceptions actually matter in the context of climate change and actions that different groups can take?
Yeah, so now we're in the transitional period and there are many changes that happen. So it might be unclear that who can or should do something and who is actually doing something. Mm-hmm. And this uncertainty might inhibit our own pro-environmental behaviors and actions, because also climate change is a collective issue. it's only if we all do something are we possible to solve it. But also the success of our actions also depending on other actors. For example, consumers couldn't purchase a sustainable product if they're way too expensive. And government policies won't be able to implement it if all the citizens don't support it. So this interdependency of action aspect make it important that we do need to understand what others are doing and how this understanding might impact our own behaviors or intention to do something.
And I think the thing that a lot of people find relatable is thinking from the perspective of the general public or like the average person. What can you say about that? How the average person sort of perceives what other actors are doing or what they could be doing more of?
Yeah, so there has been many big representative studies, whether it's in Netherlands or international-wise, zooming into the views of the general populations. I think in general, they find that government and business, also financial sectors, are found to be most responsible and capable to do something, and that they should be leading the way. But interestingly, also, it's on a positive note that people also attribute themselves as responsible. For example, I think in the CBS survey, which is the Netherlands Census Statistic Office, they find that more than half of the Dutch populations also think they themselves can do something. I think that's also the case in the US, where people think local and state government officials are responsible or should do more, but they also see themselves should be taking more action.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a very positive sort of perspective. Like there is a perception of the efficacy, I guess. So that's the term that we come up with. We use here quite a bit of the fact that you are in a position to change things yourself by taking action, but also seeing that other levels need to be taking action as well. Is that kind of a fair way to sort of
I think
describe
advocacy,
it?
Yes, advocacy is a very nice framing. It's empowering us that we can do more. But then, the other thing is also if others are not taking actions, then it might also be like a sucker effect, which is if we know nobody's behaving, then our own behaviors doesn't count as well. Then why bother trying? So it might also demotivate us, or if we think others are more responsible and capable, we may deny our own responsibility. So that's the I guess dark side of the perceptions. So it's important to understand how do people actually perceive, and how can we empower them to take up their roles.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit more about how the different actors you mentioned at the top, how are they perceived as being responsible and capable and motivated? Like those are all three different things. And I can imagine it depends on who you ask, how they perceive different actors and what level of trust they have in government maybe. But what can you say about those aspects?
I think in terms of responsibility and capability, as I said, usually the bigger entities have more power and resource.
Which makes sense.
Yes, and their decisions will affect many other people. So they are usually perceived as more capable and responsible. But I think in terms of whether they're motivated or they're currently taking actions, it's usually a bit short of the capability and responsibility that they assume to have. And what's the other question?
I guess the level of motivation of taking action, because I guess the government would be perceived as having the capacity to make big changes in a quicker way than maybe any individual could, or maybe even a group of individuals. And also in terms of government, maybe people would feel they are more responsible because they're representing the people who voted for them. But are there many insights about how motivated, not just the government, I guess, but all of the actors are to take action, and how much action are they actually taking? I feel the general public, at least from the studies and surveys I see, tend to perceive them to be less motivated or should be doing more than their current actions. But I feel that's also maybe based on the ideas that our current progress to sustainable transition is lacking behind. And maybe we based our perception of motivation, we based that on the current actions. Because we see, not many people are taking actions,
or the progress is slow, so we assume they're not motivated. Whereas in reality, it could be they're motivated, but somehow there's barriers that inhibit them to act on their motivation.
Right. Yeah. Like a lot of the other conversations we've had so far point out kind of the difference with like individual behavior change versus the structural sort of systems that enable people to act on those values that they have.
Yeah.
But I mean, this may be a bit too broad of a question, but I have to ask as sort of a follow-up that it depends on, I guess, who you're asking, but is progress happening as quickly as it could be? I mean, it could always be happening sooner, but objectively, like you hear things about different countries having all of their energy provided by renewable resources for, days at a time, or the number of wind turbines that are being built, that's increasing. Is there objectively any way to say, like, we are realistically progressing, but we need to do it even more quickly? That's a big question.
And I feel for now it's a bit depressing. I think we're not acting as fast as we should. And every year I like the most recent IPCC report, synthetic report, is giving us a final warning basically. Like now it's really the time that we need fast and drastic climate actions.
Yeah.
But but the positive takeaway from that is that obviously there's more we can do.
Yeah.
So we should step up action.
Yeah, there's more potential to do more. So it's not like we're doing everything that we can. There's more that could be done. And that could be positive or negative, I guess, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, exactly. And it also reminds me that it means the technologies and the solutions are available, but we just need human source, whether it's implementing policy or changing our own behaviors to actually implement these solutions.
Yeah. And I think you were getting at this a little bit already, but like that there's a difference between somebody's motivation or their intention to behave in a pro-environmental way versus actually following through on that behavior. But are there any misperceptions about that relationship or how those things are different?
I think, conceptually, motivation and intention can be maybe distinguished by the level of advocacy beliefs. So if, it's not just enough that people feel motivated. They also need to feel that they can take actions and that their action can help. To
feel empowered and that it actually will make a difference.
Yes. Yeah. So we also talked about it earlier. Advocacy belief is really the key to translate motivation into action.
Yeah, because otherwise you wouldn't do something if you don't feel like it has any point or if it's going to make any difference.
Yes.
Yeah. And what is the sort of relationship between when intent translates into behavior? Does it really rely on the systems around you to enable you to make those changes? Or are some people or actors so intrinsically motivated that they're going to do it anyway, even if the systems around them are making it hard to do so?
I think that's not my expertise, but I could answer.
Okay.
I could offer my 2 cents.
So, I mean, your informed opinion, it's not necessarily your expertise, but from the research that you've been doing, what can you say about that?
I feel it really depending on what kind of behaviors. So if it's more lower impact individual level behaviors, I would imagine those who are more intrinsically motivated or who has more money and more resources, maybe they can just go for the sustainable choice. Yeah. But I would say if it's more public advocacy behaviors, if you're voting for policies or to joining a protest or to demonstrate. I think the social environment or perceived social norm, what you think other people are doing or what you think other people approve, that's really important.
Yeah. And so that's why, again, kind of getting back to why perceptions matter, because if you perceive that the others around you also care or that you perceive that what you do can make a difference, then that can be the difference between taking action or not. I guess.
Thanks for making that link.
You're welcome. I'm the communications professional.
Yes.
And that's not the only topic that you've been looking into. We could speak about that even more at length, but just to make sure that we are able to address other topics that you've been looking into. Another research that you did was analyzing what people were tweeting about during the UN climate conference in 2021, COP26. I think it's kind of generally understood or assumed that people behave maybe a little bit differently online than they would in person, like less diplomatically. But what were your findings from that analysis?
Well, yeah, that I think that was the start of my PhD, and the COP is happening. Also, it's very important as it's a 5-year Paris Agreement evaluation to see whether countries are on track, to see whether they need to update their ambitions and goals. So yeah, we turned into that, and we basically collect people who tweet about climate actions and see what actors and actions do they discuss. Again, well, not surprisingly, also we're aligning with other Twitter studies and literature evidence, also IPCC report, we find government and business are deemed as most responsible and capable. But people are more angry because they're not doing enough. Or people who are going on tweets to tweet about it are demanding more actions. They show more anger or blame towards politicians. And they really also, they perceive the fear that if the policy doesn't update or cannot be more ambitious, then our life is really on the line, because climate change is gonna destroy the world.
Yeah. So there was the people with like stronger pro-environmental values were the ones that you noticed more, or like were there also people who were kind of questioning the validity of the COP, or was what was kind of the ratio of people that were saying there's not enough happening versus people who were trying to kind of downplay it or, make it sound like it wasn't as bad as it is or something?
Yeah, well, the ratio, we didn't quantify that specifically, but we do look into the top tweets that qualitatively examine what they say. And indeed, we do see more questioning about the system, about the politicians, those who should be doing more. But on a positive note, we also identify a quite large number of bottom-up activism. It's like people are signing petitions or supporting the young activists. And also they're willing to engage in climate behaviors in their own life, but also joining protest. So I would say we see two very distinct patterns. One is blaming politicians or thinking the top-down decision-makings are not in place. But on the contrary, the bottom up is also pretty strong, and people are willing to step up and change their own action.
Yeah, this may be a question that may not be answerable, but it is a question that has occurred to me. Is there a relationship between people feeling more motivated on an individual level by the fact that there's not enough happening on more structural level, that they feel like something needs to happen, I need to take action into my own hands to try to make things better? Is there a relationship between those things?
Definitely. Although my study doesn't look at the relationship specifically, but there's a compensation theory. It's like if we perceive the capable others are not doing enough, we're willing to compensate by going the extra green mile, by doing more. I've seen studies with that. It's that especially if people perceive government and business are not taking up their role, but they also, again, if they have advocacy belief that their action would help, then they are willing to step up.
Yeah. And what kinds of actions were people describing? You mentioned a few of them, like signing petitions or trying to vote on behalf of more green politicians or speaking out on behalf of young advocates. Were there other sorts of climate actions or climate behaviors that you identified?
Yeah, we actually identify a big theme that's it's solutions from different sectors. Like there's sustainable finance. It's financial sectors, they are willing to support more green investment. And also in the nature-based solutions in terms of conservations or preserve our natural resource. Because then saving nature is also saving us.
Yeah, of course.
And the other sector is the science communication. That's how we labeled it. We see many participations from research institute and universities on Twitter.
Yeah,
so
of course.
They're distributing educational resource that people can learn about the solutions and cause of climate change. Also, they're having scientists as communicators directly, because there's studies showing that people tend to trust scientists more when it comes to solutions of climate change.
Yeah, that's reassuring.
Yes.
So unfortunately not always true for everyone, but on that specific topic, that's nice to hear because that's kind of what we're doing here.
Yes.
That's part of the goal. But did you notice, like we had kind of alluded to before, that there's sort of a difference sometimes in how people talk about what they're doing online or the kinds of things they talk about online versus what they're doing in the real world and how that translates into their intentions and behaviors? So what did your study find about that, or what can you say about that aspect?
I would say maybe two keywords. One is advocacy belief. Okay, that counts as one keyword.
How about a hyphen?
Hyphen, yes. And then the other is a social norm. That also what we discussed before. So if people show that they're motivated, but they perceive too much barriers to act on their motivations, then they're not gonna translate motivation into actions. And then I think, especially in terms of online environment and in real life, I feel the social norm. So how people around them are behaving is really playing a role. It's not in my study, but other studies have shown that in the online environment tend to be more emotionally charged. So the more extreme emotions will get disseminated more easily. Then maybe that's one of the reasons that people like to be more active, motivated, or express strong emotions so that they can connect with their online social group. But in reality, especially in organization settings where people have a professional role, if they perceive their organizations are not taking enough actions, that might really act as a barriers in terms of their own pro-environmental behaviors at workplace.
Because it's sort of like, I guess, social pressure in a sense of like seeing what's happening around you, making you think, oh, this is normal or this is not normal. And that sort of plays a role. And the more extreme emotional reactions online, it's also not from our group or even from psychological research, but I know there have been studies about the algorithms on social media that they do promote the posts that are likelier to have stronger engagement. It's usually if they are a more elevated emotional sort of state. And do you think that's something that people subconsciously incorporate into how they're speaking online, or is it a deliberate strategy, or are there any sorts of insights about that?
I think it's definitely a deliberate strategy if people want to increase their online exposure. But I also feel it could be people who choose to go online have inherently stronger opinions or more pro-environmental intentions.
They have something to say in the first place, so that's why they're choosing to use that medium. And does that sort of cut both ways, or is there? And I know you'd already said there's not like a quantified ratio of that, but is there more of a tendency for that among science communicators even? Or like you were saying, that's a less emotional sort of communications approach, but would that benefit from a more emotional approach in terms of engagement? That's maybe not something you could speak about, but I just sort of am curious about that because if certain messages resonate more strongly because they sort of strike an emotional note with people and it gets the message a little bit wider, is it ethical to, do that knowingly?
I can definitely think of examples in message testing and communications that they focused on what kind of message tend to get around. But I feel, it's not ethical if you're trying to, if you're being manipulative or using very false facts just to get people angry or fear. But I do think there's better way that we can communicate our scientific insights to make people informed of why we need to address climate change and what we can do. Again, if it's strengthening advocacy belief that we can do something, then I think we should be doing it more.
And messaging that kind of focuses on potential solutions or focusing on framing things in a more positive but still accurate sort of way rather than sort of the doom and gloom sort of approach. Those are all the official questions I had. Is there anything that we haven't gotten into that you would really like to try to cover while we've got a couple more minutes? Or what would you really like to make sure people have as sort of a takeaway from this conversation?
I would say the main takeaway is, well, everyone should and can act, but also their barriers exist, whether it's the powerful entities not implementing policies or changing the practice to make it easier for us as individuals to make sustainable choice. Or it could also be our own misperceptions that other people don't care about environment, whereas that's not the case.
Yeah.
I don't know if I mentioned that point before, because also there's large representative survey showing that around the world people tend to care about environment, and especially the majority of them support climate policies, and they have high biospheric values, which means they care about nature, they want to protect the environment we live in.
Yeah.
So we really need to act on this majority consensus that we should take climate actions.
Yeah.
And also maybe just how to empower people in different positions. Well, let them know that it's important and people around them care about it, and provide them with solutions, strengthening the advocacy belief.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But thank you very much for your time and for answering all the questions. And I think that's a strong takeaway to have at the end. And that's it. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Having me.
Yes, thank you.
I enjoy the conversation.
Yes, me too. All right. Thank you. The end.